Today's class was about basically making a shape disappear. The idea of lost and found with respect to color and shape, and how color and shape can interact with recognition or legibility. So we started the class with these drawings where each student had a shape in a bag. They didn't know what was in the bag. And through touching it, they described it to a partner, and the partner would draw the shape. It's kind of like describing how to get somewhere. And the idea of this project is to expand on vocabulary and descriptive ability with respect to shape, and kind of all the nooks and crannies, and really pay attention to these kind of maps or countries, these kind of geographic surveys of what a shape can be without looking at it, simply by touching. And then we ended up drawing our own shape without looking at it, by touching it. And it's kind of like a riff off the classic blind drawing exercise. And I like to bring shape into this class because one of the pins of the class is Joseph Albers, and shape is the elephant in the room for Joseph Albers. And after we did that, we started to try to we made tracings of our animals, and then we found colored paper to match those tracings. We would trace on a colored piece of paper and try to see if we could make the shape disappear, and what that even means, how to make a form become more readily legible, is one way of thinking about it. Or also you could think about kind of the pace of the read of that form. And so in the top, we have the two dogs, and the one on the right seems to present itself more slowly, maybe. And within that conversation, we started to talk about which form seems like a positive and which form seems like a negative. Can you stick your hand through the hole of the dog on the right, and is the one on the left feel like something you can kind of put your hand under and lift off? So we started to think about the illusion of space with shape and color. And then the next exercise was to try to make the forms pop rather than sink in. So for example, this one on the left seems to pop, the lion with the orange and the cream. And so this is expanding on the project from the last class, where we had bars of color that we tried to have an odd man out, or we would come up with a metaphor for a red herring, or something that doesn't fit in, or something that is incongruous. And then this kind of starts to bring up the idea of harmony. And instead of thinking about harmony maybe in simply formal or aesthetic terms of what is kind of the flavor of the day, rather to think about it as dissonance, or yeah, some kind of aberration, I guess. So if, for example, on the right, we have a set of 4 colors, and one of them stands out, it seems to be the pink, and why? And then we can start using our vocabulary to talk about that. Is it because of its hue, because of its lightness, or because of its intensity? And so the class today was riffing off of that by having our animals pop off the page. And then after we spent some time figuring that out, we started to add like cutouts from the mix. And so this is an example from today, where we try to obscure the shape, these kind of simple animal decals that we've become familiar with throughout the class. And we started to try to obscure them with some kind of magazine cutout. And so it's kind of a paradox, right? Where we're taking a shape, and we're asking ourselves if we can make it disappear, make it take longer to read, which is the opposite of kind of our normal daily life. When you go to the store and you go to buy something, it's the whole emphasis in daily life is legibility and clarity, and then competing for clarity until we have this kind of static fuzz of a lack of clarity because of all the competition, right? So this is kind of playing with that idea and breaking open the idea of shape and color and how we are able to define a thing and read it. Um, so one solution to that, like the fish in the middle, is to have a bunch of complicated information that's in the same color sphere that kind of overwhelms our senses, and the shape of the fish maybe starts to fall apart a little bit. Whereas in the one on the right, which is really successful, you have the shape is not a solid color. The shape is cut out from some greenery, and then we have another complicated shape behind it, and it takes a while for us to read that as elephant, and we really start to have a visual poetic experience. And a lot of this comes out. We've been looking at, we started the class with a brief history of collage before the Cubists and thinking about Victorian times and female artists cutting out clippings as they became available. And after we looked at some of those, Romare Bearden came up, the great collagist from the Harlem Renaissance. And so a lot of what happened today related to things that we found in Romare Bearden and kind of the pace of these Romare Bearden collages. For example, how long it takes to be able to read this black form as an alligator or this kind of yellow sphere up here. So we kind of used Romare Bearden as a pin in collage history to think about the pace of an image. And on top of that, we had some artists in the class that are using materials that are important to them rather than kind of found materials that maybe aren't that important. So we've been dealing with this ability for collage to take in anything into its net and how we want to what kind of toolbox we want to work with. We want to work with store-bought colors, a box of store-bought colors that maybe don't have personal meaning to us, or are we going to work from old photographs that are from our family that have a lot of intense meaning for us? So within that paradigm, we started to look at an artist. I presented an artist named Herrera, Arturo Herrera from Venezuela, and I'd like to show a couple images by him before I close here. Okay, yeah. First, I'll start off with Joseph Albers. I just wanted to show a couple of these images of the Joseph Albers, the leaf pieces and some of his color studies. Since we're starting to work with paper that isn't just colored paper. So on the left, you have a Joseph Albers color study using leaves. And on the right, you have a very lost and found situation with a slow read against this kind of rich green border, really like a luscious color interaction with texture of dark green in the middle. So the artist we looked at today, the contemporary artist we looked at was this gentleman here, Herrera, and we looked at his ability to kind of continually reuse his work over time. And collage offers us that functionality. We saw that he had all these clippings and drawings he's had for years, some of them his own paintings that have been cut up, and then he recycles them into other images and then takes pictures of those images and then messes with those negatives and then prints those negatives and then puts those on the wall. And lastly, within that came up the idea of how do we what kind of art historical perspective do we take when we start to talk about artwork? And existential ways of reading works, or psychoanalytic is actually the way to talk about it, is a common way of breaking down what artworks mean. And I presented the idea of other ways of thinking about artwork that aren't as biographical maybe, or as kind of psychological in meaning when you're taking apart something that's abstract, where the narrative might not be part of the immediate read.